Hello. So research says that 25% of all mental health issues occur before the age of 22. The culture has done a good job, the media has done a good job of destigmatizing mental health for our young people. But yet, when they get to college, say, there are certain mental health care barriers that they face. Thank you. Oh, a new water. There's a new water. Good, okay. Including increased wait times at mental health centers, cost, access, et cetera. So I'm the editor-in-chief of Parents Magazine. I thought we'd go down the line here and everybody could introduce themselves and give us a few sentences about what you think you bring to this topic about young adults and college, the transition there in mental health. Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hinkle. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a therapist with Talkspace. I'm also a therapist at a community mental health agency and have been working with teens for many, many years. I'm also recently the adolescent expert with Talkspace. And hopefully I can contribute some ideas on what would be helpful for young people and improving some of the systems and relationships and connections that we have for supporting people.
Hi everyone, I'm Nguyen. I'm a student at Case Western Reserve University, also a member of Delta Tau Delta Fraternity. I also am the founder of my campus's Vietnamese Student Association, and also someone who has been through the counseling services at my local university. So in terms of things that I can contribute, definitely my own experiences with counseling at the university, but also working with other students on campus, working with them with their own experiences and what they have brought to the table, what they have seen themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Wynn Smiley. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Alpha Tau Omega National Fraternity. We represent about 10,000 undergraduate members at 145 campuses. We were the first national fraternity 3 years ago to partner with Talkspace, hopefully, based on, I've been doing this job a little over 20 years. I had zero gray hair when I started. And hopefully I can bring a little insight on why the partnership with Talkspace, and also fraternity chapters are very unique communities that anecdotally we know promote positive mental health. And so hopefully I can bring some insight there as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Marina Katako. I'm the editorial director at Thrive Global, which is the media and tech company founded by Arianna Huffington to help end the stress and burnout epidemic. Thrive just launched a new section called Thrive on Campus, which focuses on mental health on college campuses, and we've done some pretty deep research into the reasons behind the current surge of issues and solutions. And we are also starting a program for Thrive student editors at large. We just are announcing our first batch this week, but we welcome student voices to contribute to Thrive too about what you're seeing and how you're feeling and what you're experiencing on campus. So Michael, I'm going to recruit you.
Love it.
Good afternoon, I'm Jordan Bentlage. I'm the executive director of Sigma Kappa Sorority, and we just over this summer partnered with Talkspace to provide 3 months free of Talkspace therapy to all of our undergraduate women. We have 16,000 members across the nation who are doing a great job of using the resources so far. So I look forward to bringing that perspective.
Thank you. Jordan. As a Sigma Kappa, we realized in the phone call prior to this, I was a Sigma Kappa at the University of Michigan. I would have welcomed that resource at Michigan. Jordan and Wynn, talk about some of the issues that you're seeing with mental health on college campuses and in the Panhellenic associations in particular.
I would say one of the things that I noticed, especially this term, is that transition of our students, our women coming back to the college campus from being home, being abroad, being wherever they were, maybe with their people, and then transitioning back to that stress and that environment where they might not have the resources available to them and the friendships that they have maybe when they are at home. So that is one of the things. I think, you know, each campus and community has different capabilities in terms of resources. So what you have available here in the city is much different than they have in Midwest little town in Ohio. So the variety of resources as well is a huge kind of contrast and a big variable.
Yeah, I think we probably see among our undergraduates the same thing that anyone in a counseling service on campus would see across the demographic, right? So we're simply a subset. I think that one of the advantages that's also a bit of a pressure is that chapters are independent self-governing entities, and they are a small business on campus. That's part of the mission in developing leadership. I think that on the positive side, they are bonding as good friends, and I think that that's the positive. You cannot, for example, miss class more than about a day before someone's knocking on your door wondering where you are, right, or how you're doing. And those conversations happen routinely. On the other side, and I think an earlier panelist mentioned today, when I started this job, 18-year-olds, if that's my benchmark, 18-year-olds acted like 18-year-olds. Today, I see that 18-year-olds, incoming freshmen in college, are not quite there yet and are continuing to develop. They haven't been put in situations, in many cases, in which they're independent and asked to not only make their own individual decisions, but they're also holding their peers accountable and running this organization as a peer-led organization. And a lot of our undergraduates are not used to that. And so I think the Talkspace piece really gave us a tool that allows undergraduates to avoid the lines of campus counseling because you could wait 2 to 4 to 6 weeks to get an appointment after an evaluation, but also to do it anonymous or to do it without anyone else knowing. And I think that provides, lowers a barrier. Interestingly, when we announced this at our convention, chapter presidents came up to me and to Talkspace folks, Dave Kasdan in particular, and said, "Thank you. I've got some guys in my chapter. I'm not sure I'm equipped to know how to deal with this. I now can refer them." So I think that's been very helpful.
Elizabeth, as a therapist, what are you seeing in terms of the college space and how therapy is different for people who are in this very transitive moment in their lives, child to adult, but not quite, right?
And dealing with multiple stressors. So you've got the homesickness factor, the change in location from being with maybe a very structured, supportive environment to not having as many supports and resources in all types of relationships. And then possible financial implications. So there's just so many stressors for, I didn't even mention the academic part, which is the main reason they're there. And so I agree that it's an interesting paradox where kids are sort of asked to be more mature in a lot of ways and exposed to things through the internet, but at the same time don't seem to have some of the maturity and skills, tools that maybe people 20 years ago had at the same age. So I see that it's a struggle for young people to make that transition. And there's a failure to launch a lot of times.
You talked a bit about the culture of perfectionism that is part of oftentimes the high school experience leading into this moment, and then there's that after effect that takes them into college. And am I still required to be perfect? I had to work so hard to get here, and then the work is still on top of me. I'm wondering what use, maybe some of you can answer this question, what can parents do to equip their children with, I guess, an emotional vocabulary to know when they themselves may be experiencing, what's the difference between anxiety or stress or a friend? Anybody?
Michael Phelps said he's teaching his 2.5-year-old how to speak to his emotions and using lion's breath. And I think that's a great example of it's never too young to start talking to your kids and helping them to express themselves and use that type of language, and then to give support, but also in high school to find that balance of not over-functioning for your teen and because eventually they're going to have to figure some of these things out. So I talk to parents a lot of times about allowing your teens to experience consequences, whether they're natural consequences or kind of given by other parents, school, other people, that it's important for them to not be protected from those in high school and then suddenly go to college and say, in the lingo of the kids, WTF, like what's going on right now? Right. So it's really important to just allow that to happen and to not, I heard this new term, I don't know if you all have heard, the lawnmower parent, mowing down obstacles.
Yes.
It's the new thing, apparently. It used to be the helicopter parent, and I think there's still those, but now lawnmower parenting and not allowing the kid to experience obstacles is pretty detrimental.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have this conversation with mothers. I don't get many fathers calling. I think Jordan probably gets fathers. We get mothers, the women get the fathers. But I have many conversations with mothers, and I almost always say, you need to have a conversation with your son because he is not being transparent with what's going on. Right, so the son has been disciplined for some reason, or perhaps even expelled, and mother very upset, and in many cases because those skills had not been talked about before the young man went to college. It's a double-edged sword. We want parents to be involved. We welcome them certainly as part of the ATO family, and at the same time, parents sometimes have a hard time seeing that transition and knowing that their son is in a different chapter in life, and they don't want to share everything, even when they, in some cases, when they should, and the parents believe that they are still sharing everything when clearly they're not.
To expand on that point on that you were asking about, coming from a Vietnamese household, my mother and my father were immigrants, and so they raised me in a very traditional manner. And there were aspects of certain things that they approached to in the exact way that they were raised as a kid back in Vietnam. And so one of the things that they, how they approached was in terms of like mental health or health in general was sometimes different than how a lot of my peers in high school or elementary school they were exposed to as a kid themselves in their own households. So I think a certain aspect that can improve that is just in this idea of like helicopter parents. Exposing parents or raising awareness for the resources that are available and making that a norm and making that understood that it is a norm and that it's okay to reach out to these resources, to talk to these therapists, to talk to these people. Because like for me, that was not a language that was established when I was growing up. And so not only did I not know that my parents didn't know it existed, and so as a result, I didn't know it existed. So in terms of parents giving them their children's support and love, equipping them with the tools that are available is really powerful.
Elizabeth, what are you seeing in terms of the student journalists that you're talking with? Oh, goodness, not Elizabeth, Marina.
I was going to say.
Oh, I was like, why is everyone looking in my direction?
Marina, student journalist.
Liz.
Yes.
She just loves the name so much.
I know. Exactly.
Well, there are two on the panel, so I might as well just.
And everybody's from Cleveland, and there's a bunch of Sigma Kappa.
I'm the only non-Midwesterner on the panel,
yes.
FYI.
There's all sorts of.
We're all Elizabeth from Ohio.
Yes. The students that you're talking to on campuses, what are some of the biggest stressors that they're encountering, and then also barriers to getting help?
Oh man, there are a lot of stressors, and it's not always what people think. I think we went into this reporting and the theories where it's all about helicopter parents, it's all just technology, and those are indeed issues, but it's more nuanced than that. So I do think there's this culture of comparison when you can see everyone's Instagram feeds all the time, and you think everyone is just living this perfect life, their best life. But one student actually phrased it in a really interesting way, and he said everyone's Instagram feeds are filled with deleted scenes that don't make it into the feeds. You don't see anyone's deleted scenes. You don't see them failing. You don't see them stumbling. And so there's this huge culture of comparison where you think you're not measuring up. Another big issue, and it has to do with technology, but I found it interesting, is a difference between now and, say, students 20 years ago is this deprioritization of downtime, because they're always on their phones, whether they're working or they're emailing or they're scrolling or texting, and they feel like they can't ever be off. And downtime is so important, time that's unstructured and unregulated, to the development of the brain. And we know that students' brains are still developing until they're 25. So when you're always on and always thinking and feel like you need to constantly be available, it's a huge problem. It also really impacts sleep. One small study found that college students check their phones 35 times after their head hits the pillow at night. So, you know, the issue with technology and sleep is a big issue, and sleep, as we know, is also really crucial to the development of the brain and to regulating your emotions and to dealing with challenges that come up. And if sleep is disturbed, everything else is disturbed as well. And we heard from a lot of students about issues with getting help. I mean, we've had about 15 years now of advocacy and awareness about mental health issues. Go seek help, it's okay. There's no stigma around it anymore. So students, I mean, there is still a stigma, but students are more prone to actually going to their campus psychological facilities and trying to get help, and they're just not prepared for the influx. So 15 years of eliminating stigmas did exactly what's happening. And it's not even necessarily that students are, you know, we think, what's wrong with these students? What's wrong with them now? And there are issues specific to today, but they're seeking counseling, and the counseling centers are just underprepared, understaffed, and they're not ready for this influx.
So what are some of the recommended solutions? We wanted to make this a very solutions-oriented moment of the day. One question I had was, what if somebody had a therapist growing up or in their hometown, for example, and then they transition to college and don't have access to that therapist? You know, what are some of the
Well, there's this great company, it's called Talkspace.
Well, yeah.
You can take your therapist with you.
That eliminates the lines, right? Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's...
But are there issues with continuity? Should you be talk spacing with your high school therapist? Should you, you know, is there a...
Well, you have to see what works for each person. Yeah. Everybody's a little bit different. I have teenage clients who are in high school who go off to college who want to come back and check in with me on breaks and things, and sometimes that works. I also encourage them to get set up with resources at colleges, at their college. Make sure those are things that they and their parents are talking about and planning for ahead of time. What counseling services are available, what outside supports, you know, if they need to find a psychiatrist in that area. But there is, you know, a great access to therapists now with telehealth and Talkspace. Being able to find what works for you is really important. And for parents and kids really to be having that conversation well before they go to college, not as they're there and as they're struggling and as they're not going to classes and stuck in their room, because that's a really hard time then to move forward with that. It's never too late, but it makes it more challenging.
I think, like, for sure, what I think of a lot is it really boils down to, for me, in a complementary sense to therapy, healthy relationships within group, like campus organizations and groups on campus, and activities and extracurriculars that students can find common interests with other students in and build bonds and friendships through that. One of the greatest things for me, in addition to the counseling service that I had at Case, that was huge for me, was having a family, you know, back at my chapter house, at the adult house. The guys there, like, I, you know, share things that I didn't think I would share to people that I consider to be strangers, you know, 1 year before. And I would, you know, easily, if I ever had to, come to anyone's room and sit down, and they'd, you know, be right there to, like, talk to me, or, like, same thing for me to them. Like, we're a support system for each other, and that's incredible. And it's not only in Greek life. Like, I know people who are in Vietnamese Student Association or in Muslim Student Association, and they have families within these groups, and these are the people that they go to, that they have like long-lasting friendships that they build. And like people say all the time, when you go to college, you will meet people that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So wherever you may go, when you're done for college and you're moving somewhere to your new job, you're still going to have bonds with these people, if they're really that meaningful, back in your hometown or wherever you go else or wherever they go. And in addition to therapy, that's huge. Having someone that you feel like really knows you on a whole different level than your therapist does.
We hear that over and over from students. One of the most helpful things on campuses is finding your tribe, but even more than that, these peer-led groups. Hearing the stories of other students who've struggled, who maybe seem like they have it all together, is so powerful for students because they're your peers, You look to them to model what life should be like, and if you see someone who seems really cool but tells you about a time that they were really struggling, it's very powerful. I'll also add on a macro scale, we've talked to a lot of faculty at different colleges and CAP centers that have made a lot of sweeping changes in response to this need. And one of the biggest things we saw was there are classes offered about well-being, but those are often elective classes. So the students who seek them out are already looking to know more, and they're thinking about well-being, and maybe the students who need those most aren't seeking them out. So one recommendation that came up again and again is to make these part of the freshman year curriculum, teach students how to deal with their emotions, how to deal with challenges, introduce them to what services are available on campus, not just counseling, but also meditation and yoga and peer-led groups. Build these into the curriculum to establish a culture that talks about well-being from the very beginning rather than in response to an issue.
Wynn?
Well, I was thinking, and I don't know if other chapters do this or not. I would suspect they do, but at every ATO chapter, at the end of a chapter meeting, which happens weekly, the gavel is passed. And we have helped direct some of those, and when you have the gavel, you have the floor, right? And so you're going to talk about whatever's on your mind, and we have encouraged the chapter president, who will set the tone, to ask open-ended questions that college men may not generally just sort of talk about without being prompted. And one thing that we find is that college men are willing to talk about things if they're prompted, right? They're not just going to come up typically and say, man, I'm really lonely today, or I'm really struggling today. However, if they're asked, they may not say it in that way, but they'll get to the heart of it. And so I see that happen. I have been at countless of these where undergraduates will stand up and say amazing things. I wouldn't still be in school. This is my family. My family at home is a mess. This is my oasis. Things that the veneer of fraternity, frat life I call it, not the good side of fraternity, the veneer has so skewed the public's perception of a lot of good that happens in fraternity chapters that my fear is that everything's going to get washed away because of the veneer. But the truth of the matter is, under the veneer, there is a whole lot of good going on because peers are prompting their, in our case, brothers, and asking questions that allow them to share things that they normally would not.
And to add another actionable item to that, we do a very similar thing at our chapter with Pass the Gavel, but one of the most powerful aspects of that is some brothers get trained in bystander intervention or culture of care or something that our campus has resources for, and just encouraging that and raising awareness for that, making that a norm, empowering people with those kind of tools, and in these groups that they are in, when these kind of conversations happen, they are kind of the stewards of this, and that's when real change happens. Mm-hmm.
I think it's so key to just find your people, and if your people, you mentioned the tribe, fraternal organizations give you an opportunity to find a home away from home. Other associations on campus have that. But finding those people who you can be you and who can see your ups and downs, and if you're having a down, they can say, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? And provide you some resources and some guidance in terms of what direction you need to go.
I think the finding your tribe thing is very interesting, and at Parents Magazine, we often teach parents to look at, is your child an extrovert or an introvert? How do they interact with people? So Elizabeth, what do you have to say to somebody who potentially isn't a joiner, isn't somebody who would rush successfully, for example, and maybe part of their anxiety or depression is caused by loneliness? What are some of the solutions?
Yeah, that definitely comes up, because especially with depression comes isolation. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or wherever you fall on that spectrum, a lot of times, even if you're very introverted, you want to withdraw and isolate. And so reaching out and connecting with people, while can be one of the most helpful things, is also one of the most challenging sometimes for people. So I encourage people to start small, to maybe pick one activity that they really enjoy, to maybe talk to one person. You know, groups can be overwhelming, and as much as I love a group and am extroverted, I also think of people who, whether it's just by their personality or what they're struggling with, it's overwhelming. And so just encouraging them to find somebody to make a connection with, and maybe it's just one friend. And in the day of social media and our conversations earlier about how many likes do you have and how many followers do you have, it can start to feel like a competition on how many friends do you have. But really, I encourage people to look at the quality of their relationships, not the quantity. And if you have one friend who you can go to who supports you, great. It's good to diversify and have a couple of different resources out there. So maybe there's also a therapist to talk to. Maybe there's a crisis text line. Maybe you pick a couple of different places so you're not burning one person out. But just finding those small ways to connect, or a fun activity to do to sort of change the mood a little bit.
Marina, I thought it was interesting when you talked about sort of suggesting that universities and colleges make this a mandatory class, wellness and learning how to be attentive to self-care. What does the rest of the panel think about the responsibility of colleges and universities to sort of look after their students' mental health proactively instead of reactively?
I mean, I feel strongly about this, so I can talk about this all day. But I think the proactive part is so important. But I do think the reactive part is so important, especially having in-the-moment care. Brown, the head of CAPS at Brown, Will Meek, wrote an op-ed for Thrive about how he sort of overhauled the whole way that they approached mental health after talking to student groups and realizing that, you know, the way that they were working wasn't working. And one thing they did, I mean, they bulked up their counselors. They hired a in-the-moment medical intervention, like mental health intervention counselor who can help kids in the moment. But they also did away with this 50-minute intake assessment meeting that you have to have if you say, I'm not feeling well, I have a problem. Who's going to do that? You know, it's 50 minutes, and then you have to wait and wait for your next appointment. So they actually shortened it to 30 minutes, and it's a counseling session. So you get help in the then and there. It's not like, what's wrong with you? What has your life been like? How did your mom treat you? It's like, what are you struggling with in this moment? And I think that was a really interesting shift that really cut down on the wait times that their students had to wait for therapy, and made the students actually feel much better about the kind of therapy they were getting on campus.
Yes to all that. I think that, and I think that resources are limited. And I talk to campus professionals all the time. I mean, they are stretched. Student services folks are stretched. Counseling centers are very stretched. And I guess what I'm hearing is I don't necessarily see an end to that. That's why I think Talkspace, and Talkspace in particular, is very important, because it's another avenue. It takes, not only perhaps it takes some stress off, but it gets to those folks who really would not otherwise go to a counseling center or who wouldn't wait. or who don't want to walk through the union, frankly,
Yeah.
to go through the door that says counseling on it, right? The stigma part of that, but they'll sit at their computer or on their phone in their room without anyone knowing, and they'll have a conversation. So we get statistics. We of course don't know who is utilizing Talkspace, but we know the chapters that use it, and we know regions of the country. And interestingly, we had no idea. No one did. Talkspace didn't. We were sort of we were the beta test, right? There's no region that has higher utilization. It's spread 1, 2, 3 folks in chapters. It's spread evenly across the country, and which is unusual because I see very different attitudes. That's too strong of a word, but sort of regional nuances that we simply did not see in the usage of Talkspace. So that tells me that Talkspace is applicable and interesting to folks, to college students, regardless of where they grew up or where they're going to school. They're still engaging it.
Yeah, I agree. What Talkspace does so well is that in-the-moment care. We spoke with one college student who was really, really struggling her freshman year at Washington University, and she was saying, I couldn't get off my floor strewn with dirty clothes for 3 days. How am I going to get myself to a campus medical center? How am I going to deal with the insurance? How am I going to make these appointments and keep them? So that's one thing that Talkspace does really well, is it provides care, from your dorm room or wherever you are, and also the follow-up is such a big deal. Going to one session and then making it's on you to find help. If you max out at the 6 sessions, you have to go outside of campus many times, you have to pay with your own or parents' insurance. It's a lot, it's a big mental load when you're already struggling. So that follow-up and that relationship with one counselor that Talkspace provides is really powerful.
We've got undergraduates who will refer their chapter mates to Talkspace, right? So they'll go through some kind of peer-to-peer accountability. So we have a judicial process for every chapter. And I don't want to say many times, but more than, it's not a one-off. Their brothers will see the legitimate concern. And without Talkspace, they're like, you need to go to the counseling center, and that's sort of where it ends. But now they can refer them to Talkspace, and through our educational foundation, donors is fully funded, right? And so that's another incredible thing. There's not even a barrier of insurance or undergraduates trying to find the $50, right? So their peers are even seeing the value and referring their brothers in cases to Talkspace, which I think is incredible.
Jordan, does it work the same way at Sigma Kappa? Is it a referral peer-to-peer situation? Is it funded by?
It is. We are able to underwrite it. We have money that we set aside that we are able to pull from that pool, which is really nice because when you're talking 16,000 women, for 3 months, that's a lot of money. So we are able to underwrite it, which is fantastic. I think right now, most of our women are going there because they feel that they have the need. We are so new into our relationship with Talkspace that we only have results through the beginning of October, so mid-August through the beginning of October. So we haven't been able to analyze like Wynn has of where are the ranges, is there a specific region of the country, but just in an email that went out to our membership one day, the next day we had a significant number of women that reached out to Talkspace and at least created an account and started the process. So it's really exciting and heartwarming that, in one, signature, that we were able to make such a huge impact on our members.
We have about 3 minutes. Anybody have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
I just wonder, what would it take for this to become part of the counseling centers themselves?
What would it take for this to become part of the counseling centers themselves at universities, right?
I think that's a great question
Yes.
for Talkspace folks.
For Talkspace, yes. Owen?
That would be fantastic, right? But I think
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. If there were more partnerships, you mean between Talkspace and the counseling centers of the colleges. Yeah, absolutely. I can speak briefly to some firsthand experience. I have a client who is part of a college counseling service. And I was asking her for some feedback. I was telling her about this panel, and she said if Talkspace would have been around when I was in college, that would have saved me a lot of heartache. And I really do believe in this service now that I've been using it. And I wish that colleges would start partnering. And so it's so exciting that we have the partnerships with the sororities and the fraternities, and hopefully that will expand.
I think based on my conversations with Dave Kasdan over the couple of years, and one of the reasons they were excited about ATO is that our bureaucracy is a fraction, I mean, basically none, compared to any campus, right? I just think the bureaucracy makes it a little more challenging for those partnerships to happen. We can do this very quickly, and did, and I just think that the time it takes to work through all of what has to be worked through to get to that point at campuses is probably much more challenging.
Okay, I think that wraps up the panel. Thank you.
There was one other question
One other
over there?
questions? Okay, we have 40 seconds.
Me? Okay. Find me later.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we're going to take a 20-minute break, stretch your legs, get some coffee. See you back here in 20 minutes.